Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Makkot. We are up to Perek Gimel Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elui Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbai, Eliyahu ben Burcha Israelov, Chana bat Miriam, Sason ben Ryan, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam beGan Eden, Amen. And Le'avdil ben Chaim Lechaim, V'derefua Shelemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'tor Shah Chulei Israel, and Achlama Mera, Binyamin, O Tzion Chai ben Dvorah. The Mishnah begins, Hatameh she'achal et hakodesh. The following people are also given malkut: a tameh person away from an offering, va'aba'al hamikdash tameh, someone who goes into the temple while he is tameh. A person who is tameh in any way may not eat from an offering or enter the temple. Va'ochel chelev, someone who eats forbidden animal fats. The Torah forbids eating certain fats known as chelev from any domestic animal, such as a cow or a sheep. This is from the book of Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 23. V'dam, someone who eats animal blood. One may not consume blood from any animal or bird, as it says in Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 26. V'notar, a person who eats a leftover offering. Every offering must be eaten within a specific time period, usually either 1 day and 1 night or 2 days and 1 night, depending on the offering. If meat is left over after that time, it may not be eaten, it must be burned, as it says in the book of Shemot, chapter 29, verse 34. Upigul, if someone ate an offering that became disqualified as pigul. Pigul refers to an offering in which, while performing one of its essential services like its slaughter, the Kohen intended to throw its blood, to burn it, or to eat it after the permitted time for that activity. Such an offering is disqualified. It may not be eaten even during the permitted time, as it says in the book of Vayikra, chapter 19, verses 5 to 8, and Zvachim, chapter 2, Mishnah 2. V'tameh, or an offering that became tameh. If an offering becomes tameh, it is disqualified. It may not be eaten. It must be burned, as it says in the book of Vayikra, chapter 7, verse 19. Hashochet v'ama'aleh b'chutz, someone who slaughters an offering or offers that on an altar outside the temple. It is forbidden to slaughter or burn an offering in any place other than the temple. Va'ochel chametz b'Pesach, malkut are also given to one who eats chametz on Pesach. Va'ochel va'oseh melacha b'Yom HaKippurim, or one who eats or does work on Yom Kippur. Va'fatem et Hashem, one who blends a replica of the anointing oil made by Moshe. Moshe made an aromatic oil by blending certain spices with oil in specific measurements. He used this oil to anoint the Mishkan and its vessels, and the same oil was later used to anoint the vessels of the temple, as well as to anoint kings and Kohanim Gedolim. The Torah in the book of Shemot, chapter 30, verse 32, forbids a person to make a replica of this oil. V'amfatem et haktoret, one who blends a replica of the ktoret that was used in the temple. The ktoret was a blend of certain spices in specific measurements that was burned every day on the golden altar in the temple. The Torah in the book of Shemot, chapter 30, verses 34 through 38, forbids a person to make this blend of spices unless he makes it for the temple's use. Vasach b'shemen hamishcha, and one who rubs a person's skin with the anointing oil that Moshe made. In addition to the prohibition to copy the anointing oil, a person may not make personal use of the oil made by Moshe, as it says in the book of Shemot, chapter 30, verse 32. Now, all the sins listed to this point are punishable by karet, with the exception of eating an offering that became tameh. The Mishnah mentions them to teach that a person can also receive malkut for these transgressions. Other sins involving forbidden food, va'ochel nevelot, one is given malkut if he eats nevelot, animals that died without being properly slaughtered. Trefot, animals that had a fatal injury that made them non-kosher. If an animal has a type of fatal injury that will generally cause it to die within 12 months, it is considered trefa, literally torn apart. It may not be eaten even if it is slaughtered properly, as the Torah discusses in the book of Shemot, chapter 22, verse 30. Shkatzim uremasim, or if he eats shikatzim or rematzim, types of forbidden insects and rodents. The category of shkatzim includes vermin of various kinds, such as worms, snakes, and scorpions, as well as rodents and insects. In this context, it may also refer to all animals that are not kosher. The category of remasim refers to tiny worms and insects that grow inside of fruit or rotting matter. Now, produce that is grown in Eretz Yisrael may not be eaten until certain portions are separated from it. The Mishnah lists a number of food-related prohibitions that involve these portions. Achal tevel, a person is given malkut if he ate tevel, produce from which the proper portions were not separated. Several portions must be separated from produce that grows in Eretz Yisrael. The first is terumah. Standard amount is 1/50th of the crop, which is given to a Kohen. After separating terumah, the owner separates maaser rishon, a tenth of what remains, which he gives to a Levi. The owner then separates a tenth of what remains In most years, this tenth is Maaser Sheni, which the owner takes to Jerusalem and eats there. This is the procedure during the first, second, fourth, and fifth years of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. During the third and sixth years, though, the final tenth is not Maaser Sheni, but Maaser Ani, which is given to the poor. Until all these portions have been separated, the produce is called Tevel and may not be eaten. Maaser Rishon shelo nitla terumato, or Maaser Rishon whose terumat Maaser had not been taken. When the Levi receives Maaser Rishon, he must separate a tenth from it and give it to a Kohen. This is what it says in the book of Bamidbar, chapter 18, verses 26 to 28. This tenth is known as terumat Maaser. Until it is separated, the Maaser Rishon may not be eaten. Maaser Sheni v'hekdesh shelo nifdu, or if one ate Maaser Sheni that became tameh and was not redeemed, or hekdesh that was not redeemed. Now Maaser Sheni must be eaten in Jerusalem. If the Maaser Sheni becomes tameh, it may not be eaten at all. Rather, it must be redeemed for money. The sanctity of the Maaser Sheni is transferred to the money, which must be then used to buy food to be eaten in Jerusalem, and the original Maaser Sheni may then be eaten. And hekdesh, consecrated items, here in the Mishnah refers to food that was donated to the temple treasury. Since it is forbidden to derive benefit from things that belong to the temple, the food may not be eaten until it is redeemed for money. The sanctity of the food is then transferred to the money, which assumes the status of hekdesh and must be used for the temple's needs, and the food may be eaten. But the Mishnah is referring to a case if you ate Maaser Sheni that became tameh and was not redeemed, or hekdesh that was not redeemed. Now, having mentioned that a person who eats tevel is given malkut lashes, the Mishnah cites a dispute about the minimum amount of tevel a person must eat in order to be liable to malkut. Kama yochal min tevel v'yeh chayav. How much tevel must one eat to be liable to malkut? Rabbi Shimon says, Kol shu is given malkut for any amount, no matter how small. V'chachamim omrim, but the sages say kazayid. A person is not given malkut unless he eats at least a kazayid in olive's volume. A kazayid is the standard minimum for mitzvot and prohibitions that involve eating. The sages hold that this is the minimum for which a person can be given malkut, and the dispute between Rabbi Shimon and the sages applies not only to tevel, but to all the forbidden foods listed in the Mishnah. Rabbi Shimon and the sages debate their rulings. Amar lem Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon said to the sages, En atem modim li be'ochel nemala kol shu shu chayav. Do you not agree with me that someone who eats an ant of any size is liable to malkut for eating a forbidden insect, even though an ant is smaller than a kazayit? The same should be true when someone eats tevel. Amrulo, the sages said to him, it is true that a person is given malkut for eating an ant that is smaller than a kazayit, but that is only because the ant is in the form that it was created, meaning it is a whole creature with no parts missing, and is considered significant despite its size. Tevel, though, is not considered significant unless it is at least the size of a kazayit. Amarle and Rabbi Shimon said back to the sages, Af chita achad kibriyata. One kernel of wheat is also in the form that it was created. Therefore, one should receive malkut for eating one whole kernel of wheat that is tevel, no matter how small it is. In fact, Rabbi Shimon holds that a person is given malkut if he eats any amount of tevel, even if it is not a whole kernel. He argues that the sages should at least agree that a person will receive malkut for eating a whole kernel of wheat. The sages, on the other hand, hold that an ant has significance when it is whole, only because it is alive. A kernel of wheat which is not alive is not considered significant, even if it is whole. And the Rab tells us the halakha follows the opinion of the Chachamim. The halakha does not follow the opinion of Rabbi Shimon. And that is none of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel begins, Ha'ochel bikurim ad shelo kara alehen. The following are given malkut. Someone who eats bikurim, first fruits, before their owner has read the required Torah passage for them. When someone grows one of the 7 species for which Eretz Yisrael is praised, wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates, he must bring the first fruits of each year's crop to the temple, recite a passage from the Torah in the book of Dvarim, chapter 26, verses 5 to 10, and place them in front of the altar. They are then given to a Kohen who eats them. These fruits are known as bikurim. Once the bikurim have been brought to Jerusalem, they may not be eaten until the Torah passage is recited. Kochei kodashim chutz leklaim. One who eats kochei kodashim, most holy offerings. Now, all offerings belong to one of 2 groups. A, kochei kodashim, such as the chatat, mincha, and asham, the sin offering, the flour offering, and the guilt offering, which have a higher level of holiness and may be eaten only by kohanim inside the temple courtyard. Or B, kodashim kalim, such as shlamim, the shlamim, the and Todah offering, which are of lesser holiness and may be eaten even by non-Kohanim anywhere in Jerusalem. So one who eats Kodshei Kodashim, the most holy offerings, outside the curtains, meaning outside the temple courtyard, although the temple courtyard was surrounded by walls of stone, the Mishnah uses the phrase outside the curtains to mean outside the courtyard, because the Mishkan, the precursor of the temple, was surrounded by curtains rather than walls. Kodashim Kalim Maaser Sheni Chutz Lechoma. One who eats Kodashim Kalim, offers of lesser holiness, or Maaser Sheni, outside the wall of Jerusalem. Now the previous Mishnah mentioned the prohibition against eating Maaser Sheni that became Tameh, which may not be eaten anywhere. The Mishnah now refers to the prohibition against eating Maaser Sheni that is Tahor, outside of Jerusalem. You are also given Malkut for these various eatings. Now the Torah gives two special prohibitions about the Pesach offering. It is forbidden to break a bone from the offering, and it is forbidden to leave over meat from the offering past the time when it must be eaten. The Pesach offering is brought in the afternoon of Erev Pesach. It must be eaten that night. No meat may be left over until the morning, as it says in the book of Shemot, chapter 12, verse 10. So again, two prohibitions: forbidden to break a bone from the offering, and forbidden to leave over meat from the offering past the time when it must be eaten. The Mishnah discusses whether lashes are given for transgressing these prohibitions. If someone breaks the bone of a Pesach offering that is tahor valid, he is given 40 lashes. However, if someone leaves over meat of any Pesach offering, even if it is tahor, or he breaks the bone of a Pesach offering that is tameh, invalid, and no loker 40, he does not receive 40 lashes. Although it is forbidden to leave over meat from the Pesach, one who does so is simply required to burn the meat and does not receive malkut. The Torah states that if a person leaves over meat from the Pesach offering, he must burn the meat there. We will learn in the next Mishnah that whenever the Torah gives a specific commandment for a person to follow when he transgresses a prohibition, that commandment corrects the transgression and he is not given malkut for it. Therefore, a person who leaves over meat simply burns the meat and is not given malkut. In addition, the prohibition against leaving over meat is a prohibition that does not involve an action. A person transgresses the prohibition by not doing something, not eating the meat in its proper time. Malkut are not given for the violation of such a prohibition. And the prohibition to break a bone in the Pesach applies only to a Pesach that is valid, tahor. Therefore, a person who breaks a bone of a Pesach that is tameh, invalid, does not receive lashes. And that is the Nabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.